Hello everybody, welcome back to XRS Plus, and we are returning for Division 2, Division 1 to finish off this Chinese weekend. Of course, we're already getting started in Australia. The action has already begun in Division 4, but before we get onto that action, we're going to get and finish off what we had in China. It was absolutely amazing, the races we had. But to begin for Division 2, it was another Ferrari 1-2 lockout. Of course, Mos Megan wasn't in the race. However, he brought in a reserve in Luca Rosman. Of course, has now been signed for Williams. No surprise, he got a seat there. And he has secured another 1-2 lockout in qualifying. That's huge points for Ferrari already, very early in the weekend. Another notable name in qualifying, Boom Boy, putting it on P3 once again, very similar to Bahrain. Amazing to see him up at the front. Really got some pace in that Aston Martin, so he could be a real flagship driver going further into the season. Off the line for, of course, the sprint race, Rosman had an absolutely poo start, dropping down from 2nd all the way down to 6th, and had to fight his way back up. So Casper was left on his own, up against that huge battle that was going on between Coyih, Boomboy, Jayville, and Chris Stella joining that fight as well. Another notable thing for Chris Stella, P5 in quali. That is unreal for a driver who was in Division 4, Tier 4 in KRL, to jump up 2 divisions, 2 groups, and put it on P5 and be in this front fight is absolutely unreal. On the exit of turn 2, of course, this spirally corners where the track area, the track position you're in is so critical, because as you're swept across the other people's lines, you've got to be careful for collisions. One person that got unlucky with that was Nick and Zinks, as he put Nick in a wall. Very uncharacteristically DNF. You never really see Nick DNFing. He's not a driver that makes too many mistakes. But to end up in the wall at the end of the sprint, very unlucky. But it did bring out the virtual safety car. The green flags were waving on that kind of snail corner to turn 12, turn 13, going onto the main straight. I think it caught a couple drivers off guard. Christella dropping back a couple positions, who managed to get up to P3 off the line. And then the battle commenced. When I tell you, the sprint race in Division 2 was absolutely unreal. One of my favourite races I think we've had this season. It was just a sprint. It was 10 laps. But it was absolutely chaotic. I had no idea who was going to win at any point in that time. I have noticed, though, the highlights are the wrong way around. It puts the sprint second, the race first. So I do recommend you checking out that race. It'll be the second half of the video. The sprint race was unreal. The massive battle between the 2 Ferraris, between Coyih, between Boo Boy and Jayville. That's really noticeable, by the way. Coyih, Boom, and Jayville. That's Alpine, Aston Martin, and Williams. 3 smaller teams that need these points so desperately in their own little fights. This is fantastic to see them up at the front, especially Coyih in the Alpine. And Chris Stella was there as well. Coyih and Boom Boy started on the medium tyres for the sprint. The other drivers opting for the softs. They were evidently quicker at the end of the stint. Jayville, really unlucky, get clipped and ended up spinning down to outside the point. So really unlucky for him, but it was a battle up at the front for with 5 cars up in there for P1. It was evident, like I said, that the mediums were quicker further down into the sprint race, and Boom Boy getting his first win in the division. So winning the sprint race, that's a boatload of points for Aston Martin. That's fantastic. Casper finishing P2, Coyih in P3, Luca Rosman getting up from that terrible start and getting up to a P4. Not too bad at all. Not too bad at all. That's good points. Leading on to the race, and yeah, you know what I'm going to say. Boom Boy, the man on pole, getting a drive-through off the line. That is so unlucky for him after starting in such a fantastic position for the race. But yeah, he had to pull into the pits. It was a glitched safety car, so it was a rolling start for this race. But Boom Boy, with that small mistake, lifting off the clutch too early, he was forced to go into the pits, serve a drive-through, came out at the back. But a very solid recovery drive. We'll go into that in further detail shortly. But straight away, the race was on. Casper was straight on it, trying to pull away from the pack. Coyih staying with him. Luca Rosman really under pressure by Chris Stella. In the first few laps of the race, I should say, to first 5, 6, 7, they were on each other, swapping DRS down the massive straight. China isn't always a favourite track, but if you see that first sector, the twisty sector, there's so many lines you can take to get wheel to wheel with someone, which, I mean, I don't enjoy doing it, but it makes it really interesting racing. The middle sector is fantastic corners. You see there's at turn 7 and 8, the huge waving corners you've got to go around. If you can navigate around someone, that'd be a fantastic overtake. Then of course you have that massive big back straight with DRS down half of it as well, which enables some good overtaking, some good close racing as well, going into that final sector. which ends up getting quite tight. Turn 16, very, very tight corner to be going Auto Owen. And we saw that in other divisions, but yeah, the Ferrari splitting the strategies. One driver starting on the hards, one driver starting on the mediums. It was Casper going on the mediums, which is he had that pace advantage. It also meant that Christella, starting on the mediums, was able to really prioritize on this and attack Luca Rosman while he was potentially weaker. However, it got very unlucky, and they collided going into turn 1. Arguably racing against it, but it's such a quick corner. Rosman did limit Christella's room, causing her to spin down to P7, I believe. Very unlucky. That awarded him a 5-second penalty, which cost him a position at the end of the race, but we'll get onto that later. It was getting closer and closer, and of course, Crystal, like I said, she was down to P7, made an absolutely unreal move, which is in the highlights, around the outside of turn 16 on Kino, which is very, very exciting to see. But she clearly had the pace to not only stay with this front pack, but to catch up as well, which is very interesting to see. Both Ferraris opted for the soft tyres for the second stint, which made them much quicker than Coyih, who went from mediums to hards. That really limited his pace and allowed the Ferraris to get back up into a 1-2 position, but Coyih stayed just about close enough. And with the 5-second penalty that Luca Rosman was awarded for spinning Christella, it was Coyih on P2. Alpine's first podium of the season. That's unbelievable to see. It means that every single team in the entire league has now, all 10 teams have got at least one podium. That is fantastic for Coyih to be doing. Such great points for the team, and I'm sure they'll be really pleased with that. It was Casper who won the race, second win of the season, following his win in Qatar, I should say, not Bahrain. Coyih P2, that's unreal. What a podium for Alpine. Rosman getting demoted down to P3, but still a double podium for Ferrari, so still very solid points in probably their most lucrative division, actually. And Christella finishing in P4 after getting spun, getting past Javel on penalties. Fantastic job. And we're going to lead straight on to driver winner. I have a shout out, but I have my main one, and I think I've made it pretty clear already. My shout out is Casper. Absolutely brilliant drive. I think that Casper, he's clearly, I mean, I think last season in KRL he was my pace and he was battling with me, and he's really found a new drive, a new motivation. He is fantastic now. So to see him, fighting up at the front in Division 2, winning things. He'll be looking to get a Division 1 seat soon, to be fair. I mean, obviously, that'll be the end of the season. That won't be anytime soon. But he's really breaking the boundaries for what we thought was capable for one of these drivers. He now leads the championship by a good margin because Mos Megan didn't attend this race. So he's in a really good spot. Rosman, of course, is another worry for him. Now signed for Williams. That'll be a really fruitful driver for him and a flagship driver for sure. But my main driver winner is Christella, and I think this is actually unreal to think that she was in Tier 4 in KRL and didn't win the title. She lost the title out just at the end because she couldn't attend the races. To come back, get signed for Red Bull. I mean, Red Bull signed her in what was it? It wasn't Tier 3, was it? It was what was it? Was it Div 3? I think it was Div. She was signed for in Div 3 alongside McTavish when Dylan wasn't there. And it turned out she couldn't do the day. She was forced to go up a division for something completely out of her power. She went up, no complaints. Red Bull opted to sign her. Of course, it's a cheaper signing because it's a division up. They opted to give it a go, to try it. She has done fantastically for her first race. She didn't attend the first 2. I really hope to see her in more of the races. I know she can't do Australia. I cannot see her wait for her to take to the track again, because what a start. What a way to show the division, show the league how you've improved. I think this is one of the best drives I think I've seen all season, because to qualify 5th in your first race 2 divisions above where you're supposed to be is unreal. To follow that up with the P5 in the sprint, clearly showing that you've got the race pace and you're confident enough to keep up with these guys, but improve it to a P4 over the actual feature race is unreal. Staying off those penalties, benefiting off others, very good job. I think Red Bull should be so happy they've got a driver in probably their weakest division, because it's their only driver. They should be so happy that they're able to have a driver performing like this. It's a really comforting thing, I'm sure, for a team that, I mean, I don't want to say is underperforming, but they're performing higher than they were originally. But there was a lot of hype around Red Bull, and for them to be fighting McLaren and be fighting Red Bull, to be fighting Ferrari, I should say, it hasn't completely ticked off all the boxes yet. They're still finding their feet. They're fighting AlphaTauri and Williams now for P3. I think they've got the caliber to catch up with the 2 teams ahead. And I'm sure it's very comforting to think that Christella could be a driver that's going to really help out with that. So she's definitely my driver winner. My driver loser is the easiest pick I think I've ever made for any driver loser ever. HA Gamer. What is going on? What on earth is going on in that Aston Martin, bro? 15 penalty points in 3 races. That is incredibly worrying for a team that is fighting. I believe they're Are they P6? P7. That's Mercedes. I think they might be P7 or P8. They're fighting in the OCC with a team like Mercedes, which I know that they've had a worried, start to the season. I'm sure at some point me and Raven will go in on them like we did in Alpine in the podcast yesterday. But yeah, it's to be fighting a team with the caliber of Mercedes, you need to be, and if you're a small team like Aston Martin, you can't afford mistakes, you can't afford mishaps like this. A driver is on 15 penalty points in 3 races. That's 5 per race, all right? And of course, as we know, it's 21. Is it 21? Yeah, 21 penalty points for a season ban. Notice that I don't know that because I shouldn't need to know it. Why are people getting 21 penalty points in the season? I have no idea. Aston Martin need to really have a rethink about what they're going to do about this driver, because if you get a season ban, if HA gets a season ban, they then cannot reserve, they cannot sign, they cannot do anything with that seat. That seat is completely nullified because HA stays in the seat, but he's not allowed to drive. That's it. So it's a complete dead seat. There will never be a 20 grid in Division 2. And that's a fair way to be it, because if you have a driver that dangerous, you shouldn't sign them. And obviously, we didn't know about HA. He's never done any league racing before. We don't know what he was like. It has not clicked the boxes, I don't think, for Aston Martin. The way they avoid this is either help HA become safer, help him become a little bit more used to the F1 rules. Now, what I noticed actually is pretty much all his rule breaks are from racing rules, not from dangerous moves. No, he hasn't been straight lining people. He's been doing stuff like weaving on the straight and moving under braking and things like that. That's about you reading the rules of racing, really. You need to get the rule book out and you need to learn it, because it's not a difficult thing, because there's no one else who's on that many penalty. I'm on 0. I'm on 0 penalty points and he's on 15. You know what I mean? Like, it's not impossible. It's really not a difficult thing. Everyone else seems to be able to cope with it. And for him to be getting 15 penalty points so early on, and it's just not a team that needs to be having this, really. Not a team. I mean, Aston Martin hasn't really been a particularly noticeable team for the first few rounds. Obviously, they've had their good drives from Boom Boy, from Edits, but so we haven't really talked about them too much in the podcast. This is not a great way to start talking about them. So the options are either help him learn the rules of racing. This is a message to Cajun, their TP. Help him learn the rules of racing. He doesn't seem like a dangerous driver. He just doesn't understand the rules of racing yet, which is something he definitely needs to learn. He's got quali bans up until like next month, I think. So help him understand the rules of racing, or the other option is dropping him. Of course, you get a 50-point penalty and 10 mil taken off your budget, which is 10 mil that Aston Martin need and 50 points that Aston Martin definitely need. But this is Cajun's chance and time to be to show whether he's a real leader, a real team principal, to make this decision. This is a perfect decision for him to prove himself as a team principal. Is he going to drop HA, take the risk, bring someone else in, trust he can make those points back for his team and to help them improve, or does he stick with HA and help him improve personally as a driver and not get a season ban? We've got 13 races left of the season, and HA is 6 penalty points away from a season ban. So he's 2 bad incidents away from a season ban. He could do that in 1 race at this rate. So it really needs to be, but there is potential there. He's been quick. His quali pace, I think, is a little bit, a little weak potentially. His race pace is strong though, and we've seen him fighting in the solid, thick parts of the midfield. Even in China, we saw him fighting up at the front for P5, with Christella, with Malachi, with Gone to the Moon. So the pace is there, and especially in the race. But it's just the learning the race rules is something so important. And this driver is evident of that, because his 15 penalty points is mental. So it'd be interesting to see what Aston Martin do. My team winner, I can't lie, I know it's based on one driver, but I have to go for Alpine. I am so happy that finally Alpine are getting their big break. What a big bag of points that they've got from Coyih'. Coyih' is undoubtedly Alpine's best driver by an absolute landslide. And I think that I really hope that they don't misuse such a good driver. Because realistically, if Alpine don't, because obviously I don't know if you watched the podcast yesterday, the last 5 minutes of the podcast yesterday, you'll see how frustrated me and Raven were at the Team Alpine and how their season's been going, how poorly they've been performing. The worry for them is that they'll lose Coyih to any other team, not even like a high team, any other team, because he's just got more potential there. Alpine, this is their wake-up call. They've now provenly got a driver that can get a podium. Don't mishandle that. Don't mistreat that. Help him. Help your own team. We've got a good team here. We can potentially push up to be fighting to Haas and Aston Martin. And I really don't hope that they just brush that aside, because a podium from Alpine is unreal. Coyih's drive was fantastic, and I hope they don't just it's more under the bridge. You know what I mean? I hope they've really knuckled down on the fact that they've got a driver that can do that. My team loser, it's a knuckle down one. Aston Martin, poo race, absolutely poo race. I think a Boom Boy unreal quali, even better sprint to win the sprint, unreal. He was keeping up on the mediums. It's fantastic to do. To get that drive through, rookie mistake. He got a good comeback drive. I don't know where he finished. I think it was like 8th. So, I mean, good comeback drive. But this is now his 3rd comeback drive. He collided with Coyih into turn 1 of Bahrain. He got in Qatar, truth be told, it wasn't his fault, but he just got collected in an incident. Then this. He's got a quali ban in Australia due to the engineer clause being broken. He's got a quali ban with his teammate HA. We're now going to have 100% 2 Aston Martins making comeback drives. Australia is a chaotic track. There's going to be safety cars. It's probably one of the easier tracks to have a comeback drive because there's 4 DRS straights and loads of walls. So it helps you just pick them off one by one. HA, I'm sure it's okay. Boom Boy, I'm very, very interested to see what Boom Boy can do in Australia, I won't lie. So we're looking for a 4th comeback drive from him. It's just unfortunate. And while we've had 3 races this season, 2 of them have been his fault due to having comeback drives, it's just learning consistency. Really, it's just becoming a more experienced driver. And I think 100% come. Boom Boy's got real potential, which is fantastic. He's, in my opinion, he's Aston Martin's best driver. So I hope that they, again, similar to Alpine, don't mistreat him and really give him the best chance. But yeah, poo race, really unlucky drive through, and HA, one of the worst drives I think I've ever seen. I think the worst drive this season so far in XRS, potentially Corbin in Bahrain, to be fair. But need to be learning the rules of the road, really. Right, we move on to Division 1, the fastest boys to finish off the weekend, and it was another huge pole position from Teshubi that puts the McLaren on the front of the pack for the sprint race. What was very telling at the start of the race, though, Alfie cutting through those Red Bulls. The Red Bulls started in 3 and 4 for the sprint race. Very, very well, very, very good attack from Alfie. Managed to squeeze away past Banjo, then Neb after, but they did collide. We'll get onto that in a minute. Zalagi turning into Raven at turn 7. They went around turn 7 together. Very, very close racing, but Zalagi once again getting caught with a spin. And like I said, Alfie colliding with Neb and causing Neb to spin at turn 1. I'm not sure whose fault that one was. I think it may have been NFA, that one, actually. But once again, Zalagi and Neb both, again, spinning. Very unlucky races already. It's a sprint race, of course, so it gives you time to catch up. Both Red Bulls did start on the medium tyres, so Raven does catch up to Banjo pretty quick up at the front and manages to get past. But Teshubi and Somatic Coast were putting on such a show up at the front. Somatic Coast, we don't always see him fighting at the front, but this was an unreal drive by him, and really well managed from him as well, flying up with Teshubi. Raven catches up to the 2 because he started on those softs, and Teshubi and Somatic were battling, and at the very final hairpin, turn 15, Somatic and Teshubi collide, allowing Raven to get through and win the sprint race. It was an unreal finish, but it meant that 2 of the quickest boys were starting at the back of the pack because of that spin. The race started, fairly calm start. The driver stayed fairly where they were. Turn 6 was where the chaos started. Neb restroom, so late on the brakes, taking out Teshubi, and they're getting spun himself as well. So that was an incredibly lazy move from a driver who's genuinely, quite experienced and quite careful. Somatic Coast started on the softs because he wanted to catch up and make up all that lost time that he'd lost with the collision with Teshubi. Does overtake White Josh, does overtake Ghoul, so it was a pretty quick improvement. Those softs warmed up fairly quickly. Lap 7, Alfie was when Alfie took the lead. Banjo, of course, at this point was Raven? Sorry, was leading at this point. It was interesting, a real split of the tyre strategies across the field. We have Somatic Coast on the softs to try and catch up where he was. We had a couple of drivers on the hards. We had Raven West and the Ferraris on medium tyres. So it was very, very interesting. We knew this was going to be a very much strategy game about when the drivers pit. The safety car was unlikely, so it'll be interesting to see which one was the beneficial strategy. Alfie, very, very unlucky going into the hairpin. Locked his rears, which is unusual, and spun Raven. Raven went for a dive down the inside of turn 15, and Alfie, I think, locked his rears and just kind of swerved into him. I've never seen an incident like that. Spinning Raven down to P8, who was, up at the front of that battle, which would have been fantastic for his championship charge up against Neb and Tashubi as well. Another really noticeable thing that I saw with the drivers today, Big Pow. Big Pow, usually a driver that's very, very confident at the front. I knew him, well, I didn't know him, but like I've seen him drive before XRS. I knew he was quite quick, and of course he won last time out in Qatar. But yeah, a very uncharacteristically slow drive from Pow, battling at the back with the AlphaTauris. I think he ended up retiring in the pits while being in points, so he was definitely uncomfortable with that car. Just the dots didn't hook up for him, I think, today. Ziagli was doing some unreal defending, which we'll get onto later on, from anyone who would get anywhere near. The Red Bulls went for an undercut on the drivers ahead because they started on those mediums, pushed over to the hards very early, whereas Raven and White Josh, they stayed out to go onto the softs for the second stint. Ziagli opting not to pit, staying out on those dead hards and defending anyone who would get in his way. It's about a very good strategy. The most notable part for me was going around turn 7. He but legally moved Somatic Coast out of the way, allowing Alfie to get through. Very, very good strategy by the Alfa Romeos to help each other out. Very, very handy. It was Tashubi and Raven who opted for the soft tyres. Of course, Tashubi starting at the back due to the sprint. Raven being at the back because of the collision with Alfie earlier on in the race, like I said. But a big outlier in that battle was Ghoul, actually. He's got a seat now in Williams. At that point, he was reserving for Aston Martin. Very interesting strategy, going for the mediums for the second stint. I think he was the only one in that front fight who was doing that, because he started on the hard. I think it was the hards for the first stint, maybe in the softs. And he was obviously much quicker on those mediums, because at that point he was fighting everyone that undercut him. So the people on the hards for the second stint. I got past Somatic Coast, was battling with Alfie and Banjo, who was scrapping up at the front, and it was obviously going to be those four fighting for the win. Raven and Tashubi were catching, but not quick enough to catch even on those soft tyres. So it was looking like it was going to be a battle between these guys for the podium positions. The battle continued on, absolutely chaotic. Dives down the inside, 3 abreast, going into the hairpins. It was unreal to see, and I think China really praises this kind of racing with such a twisty first sector, with such some odd corners in sector 2, with some really big sweeping corners like turn 7, some hairpins like turn 6, and then of course the enormous back straight as well. It's very interesting to see the racing there, because I've never done a league race in China. Well, no, I've never seen like a full weekend in China for a league before, seeing all the different skills and stuff like that. This was evidently a very strategy-based race, waiting, seeing where the tyres would perform and at what points. And Ghoul's mediums were very, very good at this point. He managed to catch up to the drivers ahead. Of course, Somatic had to pit earlier because he started on those soft tyres, so his tyres were already at a disadvantage in comparison to Alfie and Banjo's, who were on fresher hards. The front three carried on. However, as Somatic Coast began to drop out of DRS, like I said, his tyres were dying. They went 3 abreast going down the main straight, going into the hairpin. None of them wanted to back out, and that caused Alfie to get spun at the exit of turn 16. So unlucky again for Alfa Romeo after everything Ziagli did to try and get him up positions. So unfortunate for him. And the last lap overtake from remote Banjo allows him to get past Ghoul to win the race. What unbelievable drive by Banjo to improve from an okay sprint, a very solid qualifying, to be fair, and the race he was just on top of everything all the time. So very well done by the team principal, leading by example, of course, for his team, and getting, I believe, Red Bull's first win of the season. I want to say Red Bull's first win of the season, which is really good for his team. Right, we're going to lead on to our driver winner, and my driver winner, I have to go for Banjo. I think a very, very well managed drive Solid qualifying, out-qualifying his teammate, putting it up in P3, improving that to a P2 after the collisions ahead. Not able to beat Raven, which, I mean, these two are very well matched in pace, so it'll be interesting to see how we went into the race. But managed to secure a win after all the chaos, getting the strategy right, getting the strategy right, even though it's a strategy that actually lost people races that weekend with the medium hard. Just seemed to click for him. Very, very well done drive, and I have to give it to him. It's always good to lead by example as a team principal, to be winning races and whatnot, so that's always good. My driver loser is on the other side of the Red Bull garage, is Neb. The qualified from P4, very solid. Out-qualified by a teammate, but at least you're both up there. It's always a good place to start. Absolutely criminal dive down the inside on Teshubi, and I think that was in the race. That was in the main race as well. Of course, he spun and he collided with Alfie. I think it was Alfie, which I think was given NFA because he came off his line. And then to make one of the most ridiculous dives I've ever seen down the inside. He must have had some kind of brake failure, because when I came down through turn 6 like an absolute missile and taking out the championship leader and himself. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, obviously I predicted Neb P2 in the championship. If I check now, after following this race, he's currently P7. Just very poor. There's been a lot of mistakes from him. Of course, we saw in Qatar as well, spun himself. So just a lot of little mistakes the team just can't be having. You know, Red Bull was a team that had so much hype around it to be fighting McLaren and Ferrari. They're currently nearly 200 points away from 100 points away from McLaren, 82 points away from McLaren, I think, right now. And I mean, they're battling with AlphaTauri and Williams, so I don't know. It's worrying to see, but hopefully Red Bull will be able to pick it up. It's been a wobbly start to the season for them, and for Neb definitely. He had a good race in Bahrain, but that's kind of where the good luck's finished. So yeah, Neb's going to be my driver loser. For team winner, I'm going to say Alfa Romeo. I think Ziagli, another spin, very unlucky, collided with another driver. That's something you need to look at, because Alfie and Ziagli, both of them getting penalty points on a higher basis than the other drivers are. They need to be watching out for that. Can't be making silly mistakes, not in a division like Division 1. Excuse me, but yeah, Ziagli to sacrifice his race, stay out on those old hards, potentially wait for a safety car, but realistically there was never going to be a safety car. To stay out on those hards and to defend for everything for his teammate. Literally defended everyone as well. Alfie would have finished in a fantastic position had he not spun out the final corner. He ended up finishing, where did he finish? Alfie ended up finishing 6th. Ziagli in 10th. I think Ziagli did everything he could to help his teammate. It was really unlucky with that spin colliding with Banjo and Ghoul, but you just can't fit 3 cars there at the exit turn 16. So yeah, I mean, a good teammate there by Ziagli, and it's nice to see these two working together, as opposed to what we did see in the qualifying, which is them colliding and giving Ziagli a 5-place grid penalty. So that was a good comeback for them. You know what I mean? To kind of I don't know what happened, but bury the hatchet potentially, getting each other's way. My team loser, and I just have to check this real quick because yeah, Haas. Team loser Haas. I think that Haas, relying on one driver for today's race, and it was Big Pow. It's unfortunate to see him give up like that. We saw him have a very, very solid drive in Qatar, but to not only, I mean, obviously he had a bad race anyway, didn't seem to have any pace, and was fighting closer to the back anyway. But to fight closer to the back and then also retire in the pits while you're in points, for a team like Haas, who are, you know, they're doing a solid job in the OCC right now. Actually, no, I'm looking at the wrong one right now, so I've got the facts in front of me. Haas are doing a solid job. They're in P9 currently, beating Alpine. They need to be closing that gap to Aston Martin, who are currently 42 points ahead of them. That's a gap that they need to be closing down. I think it's an unfortunate start for them in terms of just poor performances. Obviously, Big Pow's kind of an outlier, getting us their first win last time in Qatar. They're currently 5th in the Div 1 constructors, so they're clearly that points did actually really help them. But over the course of the team, they're struggling, and they really need to be getting 2 drivers on the field every single race, because they are falling back. They are falling back quite a bit to Aston Martin. Their only team they're beating is Alpine, who are, well, we've talked about them in previous podcasts, not doing great either. So yeah, I think it needs to be a knuckle down, head down moment for that team, and for Powell to retire in the pits within the points, guaranteed points. It's not a good look. Not a good look at all. Right, overall, I would give this weekend, the first sprint weekend, and a track that I know isn't everyone's favourite. It's certainly not my favourite. I won't lie, I enjoyed it. I did enjoy it, the weekend and my race. It was surprising because I don't really like the track. The first sector is so irritating, that first wiggly stupid stuff going on there. But it's actually really interesting racing. It gets you wheel to wheel very, very easily. The battles you saw through there, in addition to the massive back straight, in addition to the enormous variety of corners in the middle sector, I really enjoyed it. I'm going to give it, for the first sprint race weekend, I'm trying to think, we gave Bahrain a 10. We gave Qatar a 7. I think I gave it a 7, it might have been an 8. I think it was a 7. I'm going to give China an 8 out of 10. I think the Chinese weekend was pretty good. And I think for the first sprint, there was a fantastic battling we saw. The Div 2 sprint was unreal. I think all the sprints were unreal, actually, to be fair. I mean, we literally saw a Through Goes Raven on the last lap in Div 1. Yeah. I mean, the sprint race probably pushes it up a bit because you have so much action in such a short amount of time. I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. What a weekend we saw. Ferrari now leading the overall Constructors' Championship by a bigger margin than they did. McLaren holding on pretty tight. Red Bull, AlphaTauri battling for that P3 spot with Williams right behind. Alfa Romeo made some good gains actually on Williams, closing that point gap down to 21 points with Mercedes only 13 behind. So his midfield is looking really solid, but let's hope that Williams can pull it back up a little bit with their new signings coming into Australia and catch up with the two that they were attacking before. Aston Martin, the gap to them to Mercedes is pretty small. Let's hope that they can knuckle down and close that gap. And Haas and Alpine just beginning to drag off the back of the pack. It's been another weak performance from them this weekend, but I've got my fingers crossed for them in Australia. So join us on 7 p.m. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Division 4, 3, 2, 1. We're going to have action packed in Australia. There's going to be safety cars galore because it is a real 50-50. Who knows what's going to happen track. Strategy is going to be changed in the moment. It's going to be all fast-paced, 4 DRS straights. There's going to be overtakes everywhere. And I think that Australia is going to be a real talking point. We're going into round 4. This is where the gloves really come off. It'll be interesting to see what happens in the overall Constructors' Championship. With the gap so small, all a team needs is one good weekend, and they've caught up. So I will leave you with that, and I will join you very shortly. I'm going to be I'm going on holiday halfway through the Australia weekend. I will be catching up with all the races, don't you worry. The podcast will be coming, the highlights will be coming, all the content will be coming through. And I look forward to seeing you all down under. See you soon.